Alright, so we have right here a partially disassembled Briggs & Stratton horizontal shaft engine. And I've already got the carburetor removed. Some of the hardware I've got removed already. The reason why I'm taking this apart is because, one, I have an edger frame that it'll fit on, and two, because unfortunately this thing has low compression. But I've already actually been into this thing, just diagnosing things, looking at them. I did pull off the ratchet starter already. Alright. So, one thing I did notice already when I already had this thing apart was there is a lot of carbon buildup, which could very well be why we're having issues with this thing. The head gasket looks fine. You are supposed to replace these. So, the top of the piston looks okay. A little bit of carbon buildup, nothing that I'm overtly worried about. The inside feels okay. There's no gouging. I think our issue is stemming from the carbon buildup here on both of the valves, and I think we're having a seal issue. So, provided both of these valves aren't burned up, we can clean them up and reinstall them and reseat them. So this gasket that's here should need to be changed, but again, I'm not going to waste money just yet until I know that I can fix this thing, if it's worth fixing. So what we have in here are the valve springs, and then there's two retainer caps. You guys can see that just fine. So we're going to start with the intake valve first, which is going to be this valve right here. For this job, I'm going to use my handy Briggs & Stratton valve spring compressor, which I've already actually used and forgot to take the old spring out. But it's pretty easy. Makes this a lot easier messing with valves. But all you do is you just adjust it to how you want it. And then, so it's a little too wide there. Bring it down a little bit. And you want to get the cap, which is this piece, right up against the bottom like that. You want it flush against that bottom jaw. So we'll stick her in. And you might have to adjust it a couple times. So it's all the way in. Now here's the tricky part. You guys can kind of see how these are. They have that notch in them, or elongated hole. So basically it tilts and then you can pull the valve out. So it's very hard to describe this on camera, but all you do is you just pull it back a bit, then you can pull the valve right out like this. Like I said, it makes things a whole lot easier. So what we're going to do is clean this valve up, and then I'm going to throw some valve grinding compound on top here, and then we'll ground it down. So there's that. So let's get started. I am thinning this stuff out a little bit. So there is a little bit of water in here already, just a few drops worth. Make sure it's mixed up. And what you're going to do is coat the inside just like this. I forgot to mention, but I did clean everything off, including the mating surface. So what we're going to do is grab your valve, just throw her back in. Now, you'll want to do this for at least a few minutes. You might have to do it again, but get your valve grinding tool. So basically you just do this over and over again for at least a few minutes, then you can guarantee that you have a proper seal. So I took the valve back out and cleaned off the mating surface just a little bit so you guys can see how much of a difference there is. Looks pretty nice now. I am going to go a little bit longer with it. I'm going to put a little bit more back on. And I also forgot to mention, when you're doing this, I also changed to the larger instead of the smaller suction cup. But you want to put it back in. You want to make sure to go up and down when you're rotating it every now and then. That'll help redistribute the valve grinding compound. Alright, I think I'm sufficiently happy with this. So we'll clean this off a bit. And the valve looks a lot better. Now you do want to grind off just a little bit, not much. Basically you just want to kind of tick it a little bit with a bench grinder. And not by much. You guys can see I just took off just a little bit. You don't need to remove all that much. All I did was kind of stuck it against it for about maybe a second or half a second, pulled it back, made sure the whole mating surface was ground off. So now we can stick it back in. What that's doing is that's compensating for the amount of material you're taking off up here, because theoretically when you remove material from up here, it's going to sit further down. Now that's really not going to be that much in the grand scheme of things, but this lifter down here, it can cause issues with, because if it's sitting down too low, it's not going to seat correctly when the engine is running, so then you'll end up losing compression. So you always do want to remove just a little bit from that. Now we can take the valve and reinstall it, just like that. And what you want to do is make sure top dead center there is just barely enough to actually see there with your naked eye without the use of a feeler gauge that they are not contacting. And that's what you want, because then it's going to be relying on the full pressure of the spring to keep it down, and it's not going to be impacting that lifter or tap it. So it's kind of easiest just to put it back in the same way it came out, and you'll want to rotate that a little bit, make sure it's locked in place. Then we'll rotate the engine. And again, it's really difficult for you guys to see that, but it is still not contacting at top dead center. And for your own purposes, you can look at the other side, which has a slightly bigger gap, but remember there is carbon buildup on the other side. It's probably a little worse because it's the exhaust side. So you can see the gap there, and then back to the gap over here. You guys can see the reflection of the light in the back. So now I just have to do the other side. I'm not going to show you guys that because it's largely the same thing. You stick your handy tool in, pull that spring out, and retaining cap, just the same. It's the exact same process. Same with lapping it, it's the exact same thing. So I'll let you guys know if I find anything funny, but if not, I'm going to go ahead and do all that, clean it up, put it all back together after I've lapped it, and we'll move on with the rest of the video. So I figured I'd show you guys how bad this one is. This is likely where all of our issue is coming from. I hope this valve is still okay. I don't have another one on hand. That's how bad this is. That is pretty bad. A lot of carbon. Hopefully it was just affecting the seal, but we won't know until we clean it off. Alright, so I just wanted to show you guys it did clean up pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and lap this one and reinstall it. I did nip a little bit off of the stem too. Show you guys that they both function just fine. So now all we have to do is throw the head back on. Now, I will tell you guys, you are supposed to replace this head gasket. Now, I just want to make sure that we actually do and are able to build compression. So I'm going to use this head gasket, but I'm going to put some copper spray on it and clean it up a little bit. And then if that boosts the compression, what I just did with the valves, then I'll pull the head back off once I order a new head gasket. And, well, hopefully we don't have to replace the rings as well. So I sprayed it outside. We'll just let it set for a little bit and get a little dry. Then we'll slap her back together. And hopefully this will boost our compression. We'll see. I will make a note, though, that I do know that on Tecumseh engines, you don't want to, well, at least the manual says not to use any sort of gasket sealant or spray. They don't explicitly state that you shouldn't use copper gasket spray, but just a heads up for those of you who might be looking into doing this. This is just kind of like an experiment, so to speak, with this thing. And like I said, I'll be putting a new gasket on it anyways. Alright, so I just torqued up all the head bolts in a crisscross pattern to 140 inch-pounds. So the carburetor's back on. Now we're going to test it out and see if it'll actually start. Alright, so I just filled it up with gas. Actually, we use this one because this one still has the piece of cardboard inside it. Just for now. I'm going to run this cap through my rust remover stuff. We got full gas. I just topped off the oil. I didn't change it yet. So let's see what's going to happen. So full choke. So, looks like we'll have to tune the carburetor up on these. It's just right here. So here we are all put back together for the most part. And I've got my screwdriver here in case we need to adjust the carburetor. So full choke. The throttle is working as best I can tell. Now it's not going to fully work until the motor's spinning and the governor starts to work. So we'll do about halfway or so. I think it's going to run okay. I just have to adjust the belt tension a little bit or throw a slightly bigger belt on there, which isn't a huge deal. I've got a whole pile of them right there. But it's working. It's not really smoking all that much either, so I might have to tune the carb a little bit, but for the purposes of this video, we know it works. We know what I did, just fix this thing, So I'm more than happy with this repair and how it's gone. Hopefully the next video you guys see, this thing will be running very nicely. So stay tuned for that. You all stay classy.